What is up, you guys? This is JP, and today we're going to be comparing deload weeks and pivot weeks. For those of you who don't know, a deload week is simply just an easier week of the training that you're currently doing. So whatever your current or most previous week of training looks like, for your deload week, typically you would do the same lifts. You would just do them at lower intensities, so which AKA means less weight or a lower percentage of 1 rep max. And it would typically also be with less volume, so less sets or less reps in certain cases. But again, that's essentially what a deload is. It's just an easier week or two, it could be 1 to 2 weeks, easier 1 to 2 weeks of the training that you're currently doing. A pivot week is similar to a deload in the sense that it's supposed to be an easy week, but you are doing different exercises from the exercises that you're doing. So for example, if you're a power lifter, a lot of your program is going to consist of traditional barbell back squats, traditional barbell bench press, and traditional barbell deadlift. So for a deload week, you would do those same exercises, just less weight, less volume. And then for a pivot week, you wouldn't do those exercises at all. You would do, instead of doing, a regular barbell deadlift, you would do a trap bar deadlift. You would do some different variation, like a trap bar deadlift. For the barbell bench press, you might do like a feet up tempo bench press, or you might not even do a barbell bench press at all. You might use maybe a different, not a regular barbell. You might use one of those barbells that have different hand placements attachments. You might use something like that. For a barbell back squat, you might try something again completely different. It just depends, but the point of a pivot week is you're trying to do different exercises from the ones you normally do, and you kind of get a little wacky, if you get what I'm saying. So again, you're not doing the same exercises. Now, what prompted me to make this video was Alan Thrall. He made a video saying that deload weeks are pointless. And I know he doesn't mean that directly. I hope he doesn't, because again, deload weeks are definitely not pointless, but his title was Deload Weeks Are Pointless. And the main point that he was trying to say is that, again, I do see where he's coming from. Deload weeks for some people can be pointless in the sense that you're doing those same exercises over and over and over and over, that one, if you just do things repetitively for so long, you're gonna get burnt out from doing them. Again, you might not wanna do them, you might get bored of doing them, you might become a little bit lazy because you're just doing them so often. It might not really, you keep you on your toes, per se, for all the things that leads you to becoming a good lifter. So again, I found that with myself. Sometimes I just do bench press so long that, your setup becomes a little bit more lazy. It's like, okay, I'm really tired of bench press. I'm mentally getting burnt out from doing the same thing. So when you get a week to 2 weeks of doing a bunch of different stuff, one, it's fun. Definitely is fun. You're trying new things. You're like, okay, I haven't done this before. Two, it kind of recharges you for when you go back to your regular lifts. You're like, okay, maybe you learned something new. Maybe seeing the contrast from, doing a feet up tempo bench press is gonna help you when you have your feet planted. And I kind of recently, I didn't do a pivot week, but I actually did that with my own bench press. Is that I'm recovering from a shoulder injury, as you guys know, and I was doing bench press with a lighter weight, but I kept my same leg drive. Because I was using my same leg drive, but I was using lighter weight and higher reps, my legs would burn before I could even feel it on my chest because it was a light weight. So I had to kind of ease up on the legs and take my legs out of it. But taking my legs out of it kind of was like, oh, okay, it made me realize how much the legs help and increase stability. So even though it wasn't a pivot week, I learned something from doing something different. It prevents you from getting burnt out, but again, it also helps you learn little things. So that's basically the point of a pivot week. But what I wanted to kind of address to be talking about those two is that what Alan Thrall said is that they're pointless. I kind of disagree. I don't think deload weeks are pointless, and when you get down to the nitty-gritty, the finer details, I don't think Alan Thrall disagrees either. But again, the title can kind of be misleading to people just looking at the title and the general theme of the video. One, someone just starting out, let's just say, and I mean just starting out, it could be, 3 to 6 months. I'm assuming that even if you're a beginner, you might be working out X amount of days. It might be a lot of days that you're starting to work out or work up to. If you're someone who still feels like, one, let's just assume you're not burnt out. You might not be burnt out like the next person. And you also might need improvements on your main lifts. So if you're someone who's not burnt out and you're relatively new to training, 6 months in, and you have a deload coming up or a pivot week, either or, let's just assume it's a deload, you could take the deload instead over a pivot week because of one, what if you need a lot of technique improvements? Going less volume and lighter weight might help you focus more on technique for those lifts that you're consistently doing all the time. And again, if you're not feeling burnt out, I don't see the point of doing a pivot week. So that's a good reason to do a deload over a pivot week. Also, for those of you who are kind of like somewhat new, or, you know, again, I don't mean new by a few weeks, it could be even within a year. If you're gonna test your 1 rep maxes, let's just assume you're not a power lifter. You know, there are a lot of people who don't do powerlifting, they don't compete in any sport period, but they wanna find out where their 1 rep maxes are at. For those people who maybe not be the best at programming, if you just looked at his video, you might think, okay, well, I'm gonna do pivot weeks instead of deloads. But you need to understand and remember the principle of specificity. If you're going to test yourself for 1 rep maxes or sub-maximal tests, you wanna keep yourself fresh on those main lifts. So in those cases, you wanna do a taper, or AKA a deload week, where you do those same consistent lifts, just again at lighter weights. You're not and less volume. Essentially, it's just easier week, 1 week to 2 weeks of those same lifts. Whereas if you kind of misconstrued and said, okay, well, deload weeks are pointless, I'm not gonna do them, I'm gonna do a pivot week, it might not keep you, fresh on your toes. Imagine, doing your training, then you take 2 weeks off, do all these random lifts, and then you test on your main lifts. That doesn't make any sense. Now, someone may argue, well, that's not how you wouldn't use pivot weeks in that spot. And I agree, you're right, maybe that's the wrong utilization of a pivot week, but I'm kind of just more addressing about Alan Thrall's video, in the title of his video, saying that deload weeks are pointless, because again, they're not pointless. They have their spot compared to pivot weeks. So for deload weeks, to kind of recap, you want to use them when you're gonna have a sub-maximal test or a 1 rep max test coming up, because you want to keep that specificity. Also, if you're someone who feels like you have a lot of work to do in your technique, you might want to keep a lot of those main lifts or similar lifts you're doing in, so you can get better at those main lifts. Now, pivot weeks, I think that if you're someone who doesn't plan to test at all, you don't have a competition, obviously, or you're not going to test on your own, then I would utilize pivot weeks in that sense. Also, if you're someone who's been training for so long, let's just say you're years into training and you're just really tired of the lifts you're doing, implementing pivot weeks can be good, because again, you're burnt out from doing the same lifts. You can learn a lot more from experimenting, which I find myself. Also, one final note is that sometimes people will program pivot weeks a little bit differently. They won't, for example, it's similar to a deload, but they won't go, they won't go lighter on the intensity. They'll keep intensity somewhat the same, and then they just reduce volume by doing a couple less sets, but they keep, the intensity same. So they're still hard sets, they just do less hard sets. So if you're someone who sees pivot weeks programming like that, or does them yourself like that, that's not wrong to do it that way, because again, it's all individualistic. But I'm just saying that certain people might need more of a pullback on the intensity and volume than other people. So be careful of that, and take me as an example. I feel like when I started training with my coach, he asked me if I wanted to finish my program, and I had a deload planned out. I said, nah, forget it, I'm just gonna start the program. I was anxious to start, I wanted to start, and I knew better, and I didn't take my deload. And what do you know? Right after that, I ended up injuring my shoulder. Now, I'm not saying that was the direct cause of the injury, because correlation doesn't mean causation. My form was good on everything that I was doing. It could have just been overuse. But again, that's the point of a deload, is to prevent injuries in that manner. It could be an overuse injury that you want to prevent. So in that case, if you're programming a pivot week like that, that might be another negative downside to a pivot week, is that you yourself might need just a full, total, overall deload, so you can pull back and recover from any nicks and bruises you got from regular training. If you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.